What's up, everyone? The fine denizens of the Vanguard community. How's it going, Zach?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Gavin over here trying to embarrass me with his vocabulary off the bat this morning, using terms like denizen. Woof. I don't know. Might need a college graduate to co-host this show with you.
Yeah. Anyway, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the Vanguard. Thanks for tuning in today. It's a bit hot up here for Zach and I. Our AC is actually broken. It went out the other day, so we've been suffering. And if you can believe it, the studio is actually the hottest part of our entire apartment. So we're going to do our best to get through the stream. But if we get extra angry, it's probably just because we're all hot and bothered given this fucking intense heat.
Yeah, dude, it's hot as fuck up here. I almost did this entire stream from my bedroom, but then I was like, no, for the sake of consistency, I'll get back up here and suffer with Gavin. Yeah, it's hottest fuck. The studio is on the top floor of our apartment. Gavin just disappeared, so we're having a great go of things right now. But yeah, about to do a shout out to our patron whom we love, people that keep the show running. Always fickle in these times with what YouTube's going to do, how the algorithm's going to fuck with us. So those patrons are the bedrock of any kind of consistency and financial stability that Gavin and I might have. So special shout out to you guys, Vanguardians, Super Vanguardians, and comrades alike. You're obviously all comrades to us.
Yeah, huge shout out to the Vanguard patron community. If you're interested in joining, then hit up the link in the description. It's going to be patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. But again, that link can be found in the description of this live stream and all of our video content, all of our live content. Again, so hit that up if you enjoy the show, if you want to see more, if you want to support the work that Zach and I are doing. But yeah, we do like to start and end all of our live streams with a big fat sincere shout out to the patron community, because again, they do make the show possible. We would not be able to do the show without you guys. So thank you for your support. Really appreciate that. And let's move on, get today's show started. Again, thanks everyone for tuning into the show today. I see some people trickling into the chat, commenting on some stuff, getting excited to hear about some of these topics we're going to be discussing today. And make sure to stick around, by the way, guys, for the entire episode, because we do have another big announcement, if you can believe it. We made a big announcement on our last live stream too about the fact that we're going to be on this week's Crystal Kyle Friends episode. But we have another big announcement for the end of this episode. So make sure to stick around. I think you guys are going to be really excited to find out what's coming in the near future for the Vanguard. Big stuff. So really excited about that. But while we wait, looks like we do have one super chat already. Thank you so much, Mary Posa, for the first super chat of the live stream. Really appreciate that. Kim and Bree are woefully underinformed about transgender Americans and our struggles. They should have kept on the topic of speech, but just created a space for people to trash Esperanza. Well, we're going to be discussing this in a little bit later in the stream, Mary Posa. So thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Really appreciate it. Don't want to spoil our thoughts on this whole segment, but really appreciate the comment anyway. And again, stay tuned because we're going to do a deep dive into this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the $10 donation. And yeah, we're going to get into all of that later on in the live stream. But yeah, super excited for another big Vanguard announcement. But that's all we'll say about that. And why did you put that on the screen?
The people wanted to know, man. They wanted to know.
Me, unfortunately, unless the day that YouTube yanks our channel and demonetizes us, come hit me.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we might need to add a new patron tier is all I'm saying, but if we really got to pay the bill somehow, bro, you're gonna have to take one for the team. Anyway, let's get into today's first news topic. I think probably a good one to start with. Let's start serious. Before you guys click away because we start talking about serious stuff, just hang around for 5 minutes. We're going to get to the juicy drama and all that crap in 1 second. But this is seriously important stuff. The other day, it was teased that Joe Biden might be about to announce a climate emergency, a national emergency around the climate change catastrophe. And you guys might remember that Donald Trump, when he was president, I think declared 2 national emergencies, one obviously for coronavirus, and number 2, or I guess the one previous to that, was because of the border wall, in order to secure the necessary funding for his dumb border wall. So anyway, Joe Biden, was like considering declaring a national emergency to take care of, or at least to attempt to take care of, the climate catastrophe, which is upon us, in case you haven't fucking noticed. But in traditional, typical, predictable Biden fashion, he's holding off for now. Just like with the student loan forgiveness that he keeps teasing, like, oh, do you want some forgiveness? Do you want some forgiveness? Just like that. Now on climate, also, it's like, we're thinking about doing something, but nah, we're not. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to let everyone die, burn to death. So as it says here, President Biden will travel to Massachusetts on Wednesday to promote new efforts to combat climate change, although he will not declare an emergency that would unlock federal resources to deal with the issue, despite increasing pressure from climate activists and Democratic lawmakers. So yeah, despite even his own milquetoast ass party, pressuring him to do this, and obviously climate activists, nope, still not going to do it. Not an emergency. We're all good. It's fine.
Yeah, well, we're clearly not fine because if you look at it, and obviously we were talking about this on Colin. We have a little bit of a U.S. centric perspective just because we live here and this is our government, etc. But if you look all across Europe and all across all parts of the world, right, we're seeing massive heat waves. 12 states in America right now are dealing with heat-related forest fires. That's not just California, but there are massive fires in Alaska, Idaho, places where typically there are no fires. I was recently out in Moab, Utah, and they literally locked up all of the firewood that was for sale, and they had a huge sign in front of it. It said basically informing people it's illegal to sell firewood right now in that part of the country because fires are so dangerous. I was there on the 4th of July. There were no fireworks, which is a little weird and disorienting on the 4th of July, and especially as part of a right-wing part of the country in Utah. You know what I mean? You would expect a lot of celebration of America, but they couldn't because it was illegal because of the forest fires. So that's all background, but these are the kind of new things that we're dealing with. Obviously, it's massively hot. And on top of that, every single bombshell research paper shows that it's only getting worse and that we have a very finite amount of time to do something about this. So the pump faking that Joe Biden is doing, I just think it's going to continue to drive a wedge between him and the people that he needs to turn out and support him in the 2024 election, and also just keep driving us crazy as we hurl like a cannonball towards destruction. And we had a caller point out, I think quite correctly on our show the other day, that said, hey guys, obviously we're going to be thinking about this from a human perspective because we are human, but we're also destroying every other element of this planet. Think about how many species of bugs, birds, all kinds of different animals and creatures and plants and fungi that are going to be eradicated from this planet and already have been permanently, right? We're destroying billions of years of evolution and art and experience from all these animals and creatures as well. So it's just this mind-boggling thing. And to just watch the Democratic Party, the party that's supposed to care, be so callous about this, to be so, slow and unmoved to effort. It's bullshit.
Absolutely. And here's an article right here about how apparently the Atlantic Ocean is pretty much dead because essentially all of the plankton have been wiped out. So sounds like an emergency to me, right? Sounds like a bit of an emergency to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I don't know if you guys remember, Gavin, I know you certainly do. We covered this on our show multiple times, but there was a massive amount of hysteria around the idea of Donald Trump declaring a national emergency, and you have all kinds of insane fucking power when you're president and you can declare a national emergency, and you can access a shit ton of resources. You have all these weird laws, like they could shut down the internet, like they can do all kinds of crazy shit, but they can also take over factories, right? They can change things extremely swiftly. This would be one of those few narrow instances where I'm like, yeah, this is what we need to do. I wouldn't be afraid at all. I would actually be begging somebody as incompetent and fucking, incoherent and just downright, innocent, president like Joe Biden. I would be begging him to do it just to address the climate change because I think it's so worthwhile. I think it's baffling to me that, Obama never did anything about this. I mean, not baffling. He was so owned by the corporate America, but the fact that the Democrats never forced him to seriously address climate change at all. And then under Donald Trump, we got sort of a push, as we were talking about again yesterday with the Sunrise Movement. But under Joe Biden, there's just been absolutely no effort to take this seriously. And it's like maddening. I think maybe because we're young people, and that's not to exclude the old people who have been, or elderly population that has been fucking fighting for this for a long time, right? We always get emails from people that are like, hey, fuck you, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. And I'm like, sorry, that's right, you have been doing this longer than I've been alive. But young people, I just feel like it's always been there. Like I've watched lightning bugs disappear, right? That's a fucking crazy thing. When Gavin and I were a kid, everybody in the Midwest ran out in their backyard and you would catch lightning bugs either in your hand, or sometimes you would try and get them in a mason jar. And you would poke holes in the top and make sure that, and then you had like a little light if you were camping or something like that. Now go outside in the middle of the night, you don't see any fucking lightning bugs. That's like the first number one sign to me of climate change impacting in a serious way. And of course that seems relatively innocuous, but I don't know. It's maddening to me, and also just insane. It seems hysterical that they're not doing anything to challenge this, which is our in my view, our biggest threat to national security.
Yeah, it's truly crazy. And thank you, Victor, for the 499. You're both pro-nuclear. I think a green transition without nuclear basically turns us into Germany, with any slight disturbance creating energy chaos. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm pro-nuclear. It's not like let's go nuclear. I'm not like super excited about it. But I do understand the argument people make where it's like, we might have like less than 5 years to prevent this apocalypse. And nuclear obviously does create a lot less carbon emissions than fossil fuel burning energy sources. So I do get why people say that at least in the next like 5 to 10 years, we should put more resources into nuclear rather than fossil fuels, just to potentially avert the fucking literal apocalypse. I do understand that. But that being said, that's not to say that there aren't serious dangers associated with nuclear energy as well that have to be taken very, very seriously.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's, look, the thing that's dangerous to me particularly is nuclear energy combined with capitalism, because what does capitalism incentivize? Cutting corners, saving a buck, not 100% prioritizing safety, right? So that would be obviously the drawback to nuclear. I think that if you had a society that, extremely prioritized safety, and I know people will say, well, there's a chance of a meltdown. And I think if you really put your mind to it, and we were like, this is like our only hope of getting to a green transition, that our, best and brightest scientists out there could collectively come up with a way to mitigate whatever harm would be caused from nuclear energy in the off chance, or, in this, whatever chance there would be that, a meltdown occurred. Because obviously I don't want to underplay the threat of that, and why people would be fearful of like a nuclear meltdown, particularly because if it happened, all kinds of.
But it's not like there aren't oil spills every goddamn other day.
Right. Yeah, obviously that's true. But just the sheer levels of destruction from nuclear, I mean, I don't know. With it would be, if I don't know, it is something to definitely be concerned about. But that being said, I just don't think that it outweighs those concerns outweigh the sheer certainty of death from climate change if we keep mining petroleum, which will be the only other option that we have. Not because I'm in favor of those options, just because of the way the world's set up and we're already on this moving train.
Mm-hmm. That's basically the way I feel about it too. Thank you, Victor, and let us know what you think. Also, I'd be interested in your opinion. And obviously, Zach and I are not experts in energy and all that stuff. So that's just based on what I've heard. But that would be what I would say. Thank you also, Hysteric Raider, for the $5. The emergency was 30 years ago. I think it's a little bit too late. Plus, it's going to be some half measures that does little to nothing and call it a win. Well, yeah, that's the ironic thing, Hysteric Raider. You're absolutely right. Not only should it have been done 30 years ago if this was taken seriously, but the funny thing is that even if Joe Biden did declare a climate emergency, I would be willing to bet that whatever that climate emergency would entail would still be a half measure, would still not even be close to far enough as far as, addressing this catastrophe in a serious way. But he's not even going to do that. He's not even going to do the half measure.
No, 100%. And that's why people hate the Democrats, right? I mean, I always bring up the Simpsons meme that you guys are all familiar with, where it's like the Republican convention. It's like, we want terrible things, and then that we can't govern, right? They can't fucking govern, and they won't govern. So yeah, I don't think that we'll be able to get out of this either. However, we try and maintain a more positive outlook, more optimistic outlook on this show. So even though, and it's interesting too, because there's one other side note that's really a bummer. If you think about the initial research that came out, like even in the 90s when Al Gore was making an inconvenient truth, Gavin. I know, I'm kidding. But when Al Gore was making inconvenient truth and all of that, we have actually done more damage since that point to the climate. We have burned more carbon globally. We have, accelerated our, raising of the temperature of the earth. More so than we did even in ignorance, right? So the fact that we knew what we were doing didn't stop us at all. In fact, we didn't even scale back. We massively ramped up. So of course, I have no reason to believe that we will change that. However, I just think it's the moral and ethical position to advocate for changing that.
I don't know, bro. It sounds like a commie conspiracy theory. Sounds like an excuse to bring on the Great Reset. No, I'm just kidding. But some people actually think that, which is funny. Anyway, let's move into our next topic. This one really set Twitter ablaze yesterday. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. That would be this video of AOC getting arrested, I guess you could say. Let's take a look at this video. This is her being arrested outside the Capitol, I believe. Here's some footage. She's walking. She's chilling. She's apparently getting arrested. But as you can see here, as many people said, pointed out, and, made fun of, she's kind of, it looks like she's in handcuffs, but then you realize, oh, she's not actually in handcuffs. And she's just kind of crossing her hands that way. So it's interesting. A lot of people are saying, oh, she's just pretending to be arrested. She was just pretending to be handcuffed. And, first of all, I'll let you guys know I've been arrested, and I wasn't handcuffed, but they did make me put my hands behind my back when they were doing this shit. So I don't think AOC was just pretending or it was all just a fucking false flag or whatever. I think a lot of people have gone a little bit overboard with their, condemnation of this when it does appear that she's, just being escorted away by the cops and et cetera, et cetera. As you can see there, she puts up the Josh Hawley fist and moves on and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, a lot of people arguing about this. Again, it's created this big, clusterfuck on Twitter, at least on left Twitter. And I have a little bit of mixed feelings on this one because on one hand, I do think AOC should obviously be doing more as an elected official to seriously challenge her own party's leadership, that of course being Joe Biden. And if this was just like your average regular civilian, I would say, well, it's super commendable that you went out and, got arrested protesting for abortion rights. That's awesome. And, I still think that it's cool that AOC protested. But I still, feel that she's not seriously using her power in a real way. She's not really challenging Joe Biden or the Democratic Party even in a legislative way, which is her job. Her job is not just to be an activist out on the street doing these protests. Her job is to be a congresswoman, and she has a lot of sway. Even though she's very hated by a lot of the population, she still is a popular politician. She has a large Twitter following, and in my opinion, she hasn't been damn near aggressive enough at all against Joe Biden and the Democrats for their complete and utter fecklessness in this situation. You know what I'm saying, Zach?
Oh, 100%. And I see some people are melting down because we're being fucking reasonable about this. I see you, Fisher. Take a rationality pill, please. Jesus Christ. Yeah, if you have been to these public disobedience things before, civil disobedience before, Mike Preisner actually had a thread about this. He was like, this is actually entirely common, particularly with a high profile individual. But as Gavin mentioned, even if you're just a lowly person that's been busted for, something on the hard streets of Lenexa, Kansas, right? It is what it is. Like, they were probably like, okay, we're going to take you off. You're being arrested. Are you, comply? Of course, she's going to comply. She's an elected official, and they're going to walk her off, and they're going to treat her way nicer, of course, than they treated the people during like the George Floyd protest who were fucking zip tied and put in the big vans and sprayed down and beat the fuck up and all those kinds of things. Like that, these things aren't comparable. But this idea that it's like pretend or that it's fake or that it's like staged, that's also a little unreasonable. No, she went there, she did her civil disobedience, and she was escorted away. She was arrested. She'll immediately post bail and get the fuck out of there, right? Like that's essentially what happened. And no, this isn't a grandstand for, women's rights. Like she should be doing more, and I'm hoping that she will do more. We're not simps for AOC, but I just thought the freak out around this was like so like ridiculous. It's like AOC doesn't do anything, and then like AOC like does do like a little bit of something, and everybody was like, why did you do that? You know, it's just like, okay, like just give it a break. Like, yes, it was like a little bit, you know, not enough by a lot, I guess you could say. But I don't know. I don't know why people get outraged about like the little things like this with AOC.
Well, let me give you a little bit of insight into that, Zach, because I do understand why people are a little bit pissed off about it. Here's an email she sent out right afterwards. AOC was just arrested by the Capitol Police outside the Supreme Court. Like, okay, clearly you weren't really being arrested. You were being like escorted off. I don't think AOC had to spend the night in a fucking jail cell or whatever. And again, I would be a lot more enthusiastic about donating to AOC and you know, supporting her if I really felt like she was doing something serious. And again, it's commendable to go get arrested at a protest. If that was like, you know, just someone I knew, a normal person, I would be like, that's fucking dope, bro. That's awesome. You know, you really you know, risk your safety and your freedom in order to, you know, make this point. But we all know that this was a little bit performative, let's be honest. And again, when AOC was campaigning to get elected, she wasn't, you know, this was not supposed to be the end all and be all of her activism. You know, she was actually running a campaign that was about seriously challenging power and about challenging the Democratic Party. And this just isn't that. Again, this isn't going to change anything. It, you know, got her a lot of attention on Twitter, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change literally anything about what's going on, about the direction of the Democratic Party. And she's not even out here really calling out Joe Biden in an aggressive way like she needs to be. Again, in the face of his administration complete and utter fecklessness right now, when people's human rights are literally being stripped from us. We need someone in the White House that's fighting for us, not that's enabling these fascists on the right wing, which is what Joe Biden is doing. And instead of actually, you know, doing her job and seriously, you know, taking on these powers that be as a legislator, I feel like AOC sometimes does this stuff instead and pretends it's just as valuable. Does that make any sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I would agree with absolutely all of those criticisms. Like, I wouldn't donate to AOC after that happens. I just think that I just think it's a random thing to criticize her for. She goes to a fucking event, you know, she stands in protest with the rest of the people. Like, did she do enough there? No. Did she have a megaphone on top of a bus with a crowd of people and get hauled off kicking and screaming like I wanted her to? No. But I just think it's a little bit of a random thing to criticize her for, to be like, oh, you were here. Like, I don't think it was staged, right? Like, I think she genuinely was like fucking walked off. Being staged would mean like she knew the officers, this was all planned. She was, you know, and it's like, you don't even need to stage a civil disobedience arrest. You literally just know you're going to get arrested, and then you show up, and that's your fucking civil disobedience is getting arrested, and that's a perfectly valid form of activism.
Well, didn't you think it was kind of like, didn't you think it was kind of bullshit when like Nick Brana went to the steps and got arrested and was like, I was arrested protesting on the steps of the Capitol and all that stuff? Like, don't you kind of see this as a similar thing?
Oh, it is a similar thing for sure. But I also don't think, like, of all the things to criticize Nick Brana for, that's what I would like number one get on him for. Like, yeah, that dude was out there exercising his free speech, and like he was doing civil disobedience in that capacity. And like, I would much rather see him doing that than like, you know, fucking wasting $20,000 of people's party on a logo that never comes to fruition, or God forbid anything else that he's been accused of doing.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, I just think the problem that a lot of people has, especially when she tries to fundraise off of stuff like this, is it's like, we see that you're not really doing what you said you were going to do. We can tell that you're not actually doing what you promised your voters and the people that donated to you and fundraised for. And this is not an acceptable replacement. You know, you can't just fundraise off this while you don't do what you said you were going to do, as if you're some sort of, you know, revolutionary. And like, no, we need a serious person to seriously resist the powers that be. And that's including Joe Biden right now, who's overseeing and enabling the stripping of human rights that have been afforded to us for over 50 years. So I just wish she was taking him. I'm not trying to say she's not taking it seriously. I'm sure this is something that's very meaningful to AOC, but I just wish she would be more willing to put her career on the line in order to really speak out and to really resist the powers that be in a serious way. And again, I just don't see that happening from her. I'm not saying she's as bad as fucking, you know, Chuck Schumer, obviously not. But I just think what we were sold is a lot, you know, better than what we ended up getting. And it's like, okay, good job. You got arrested. Like, so did, you know, people I know that go protest outside at the plaza in Kansas City. Like, that's not like good for you.
No, I totally agree with that, actually. And I think that she's been a cheap facsimile of what she promised to us. And I've said multiple times on air that I don't support, that I don't recommend anybody donate to her, and that I would support a primary challenger to her because, you know, she hasn't been authentic in her goals. All I'm saying is that, you know, this like civil disobedience, going to a place, getting arrested as a protest to your government, of saying, no, I should have the right to do this, and I am getting like, that is not something that I think needs to be like, you know, Like that is something that I actually am supportive of. So I don't want to like bemoan the fact that like AOC did that, even though of course it's not what she sold us, and that is the problem, right? To me, the problem isn't that she went and did this thing. If AOC had been fighting tooth and fucking nail and dragging Joe Biden and fucking, you know, forcing the vote and, you know, sticking it to Nancy Pelosi and sitting outside of her office, and then she goes and does this exact same thing, like I don't think a lot of people have a problem with it, right? So I just want to make it clear that I don't think it's the thing that people have a problem with. It's the fact that this is what she's doing instead of all of the other things that she promised people she would do. That this feels like it's not actually moving the ball forward to them because she's a congressperson. And as you mentioned, Gavin, she has more power than the average Joe who could go perform civil disobedience. So I would much rather see her out there like leading a group of people. And like, yeah, I get this is cringy, right? Like I'm not trying to say that this is like based revolutionary shit, but in principle I do agree with acts of civil disobedience like this. And you know, I just don't want to like get caught up in the whole like bemoaning this and bemoaning that just because like, okay, yes, she put up a bunch of cringy Twitter pictures and like, yeah, they haven't been the force of change that they promised us that they would be. And you know, no, I mean, we have been extremely critical of them, Gavin.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think a lot of like people on the right wing, like assholes like Tucker Carlson and stuff, that just have AOC derangement syndrome. Like I do think they've taken it too far, and they're like acting like it's worse than it actually is, when in reality it is just like a little bit cringy. And like, damn, I wish he was actually seriously fighting for us instead of just like, you know, doing these photo ops out front in the Capitol. You know what I mean? But agreed, a lot of people have taken it too far and have gotten overly nasty, and it's like there's no point in that. It's just kind of stupid. But anyway, thank you so much, Christopher, for the $4.99. The fact that the story is about her arrest points to her not even saying anything at the protest worthwhile. Her presence means nothing. Thanks for the super chat, Christopher. Really appreciate that.
I would disagree that her presence means nothing. I think it would. I think that at the very least, it does encourage more people to show up just because she is massively popular. But I would say that her presence means much less than it could have if she'd fully utilized her platform.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you so much, Christopher. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. These bitches want Nikes. Briefly touch on Dan Cox's victory in Maryland. We might get around to that. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat. And if we get a chance towards the end of the stream, we will try to talk about that. But thank you so much for the super chat.
Dan Cox is a crazy fuck, man, but no, we'll talk about him.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for the $20. Really appreciate that. Super generous donation. It was 100 degrees in DC yesterday. Does she have a hidden file in that coat? LOL. Yeah, that is quite a coat. It looks like it's made out of like wool or something. I'm like, Jesus Christ, how the fuck were you out there in that heat, AOC? You know, when I'm outside, even if I'm in like just a t-shirt, I end up taking that shit off because it's so hot outside. So I don't understand how anyone's out there, you know, in coats and shit like that in this weather. But either way, really appreciate the super chat, Cheryl.
Yeah, Gavin and I were on a walk yesterday, and he just goes full Midwestern dad. He just yanks his shirt off on the sidewalk and is like, "Fuck it, dude, it's too hot," and just like, you know, shoves it in his pocket and is like, "Fuck it, dude, I'm just going shirtless today." And then ever since then, it's been a chain reaction. He's like, "Fuck it, if I'm outside, it's too hot for shirts." I'm like, I respect that game, Gavin.
I usually am not the kind of guy that takes off my shirt, but it's so goddamn hot. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm boiling alive out here. Getting hella tan too. But anyway, thank you so much, Cheryl, for the $20. Really appreciate that. And stick around, guys. We're about to move on to the Kim Iversen story as soon as we get through these super chats. Thank you so much, Jose, for the $5. The most insincere moment of her was explaining she voted president for the Israel Iron Dome funding. The explanation she gave after was even more terrible. Yeah, Jose, I obviously I remember covering that at the time. Super disappointing. And the worst part about that all was that literally AOC walked up to her while she was on the floor of the house and like whispered something in her ear, seemingly got her to change her vote. And then AOC was like crying. Speaking of performative fucking bullshit stunts, remember AOC crying before she voted no or voted yes, president, whatever she did?
Yeah, 100%. And look, this is what I'm saying. There's plenty of valid shit to criticize AOC for. So I'm not trying to be a simp, right? When she, her vote for the on the Iron Dome funding was horseshit. The fact that she changed it again after Gavin pointed out that Mama Bear came and said that she was going to make it real fucking hard for her. Life was going to get real tough if she actually defended her values. And then she came out and was like, oh, the who and the what, which is the explanation I imagine that Jose is referencing. And yeah, no, there's so many moments that were just bad, piss poor, terrible. When she's out there calling Nancy Pelosi the mama bear and all these kinds of things, like drag her through the fucking mud for that. Protesting for a fucking this radically unjust Supreme Court decision and exercising in civil disobedience, while not enough, is not something that I think warrants criticism, is what I was going to say.
Yeah, and just in case anyone wants to say, oh, well, why don't you guys criticize Bernie Sanders the same way you do AOC? We fucking do. You don't think we criticize Bernie Sanders heavily for calling Joe Biden his good friend over and over and over and over again and refusing to attack him aggressively? It's the same thing we criticize AOC for with her relationship to Pelosi, calling her mama bear and refusing to actually challenge power in a real way. So we absolutely criticize both of them equally. Just a side note in case anyone was wondering. But thank you also, Hysteric Raider, for the $5. Feels like she wants a participation trophy rather than going for the gold. Yeah, maybe if AOC got like fucking tear gassed or something, then I'd be more likely to give her credit. But come on, bro. Like I said, when I got fucking arrested for pot, they treated me more harshly than that shit.
But you said they didn't make you wear handcuffs.
They didn't. I'm just saying it looked like she was getting an escort.
Because she's a congressperson. That's what I said. Of course they're going to treat her like that. She's a congressperson. I mean, even if you watch like fucking Bernie Madoff getting arrested, dude, like they treat him real fucking nicely as they're escorting him. Like that's what fucking pigs are trained to do. They treat the elites nicely. They're the foot soldiers for those people, right?
So I don't want AOC to be an elite. I want her to be an activist in Congress that's fighting the elites.
No, I know. And that's the whole bedrock of our criticism. I just think this is the one time that she was doing something that was like, you know, like 10% correct or something. And so I'm not going to bash her for it when most of the time she's like 10%, 30% wrong.
Yeah, no, I generally agree. I just think it is kind of funny. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much, Hysteric Raider, for the $5. Really appreciate that. Absolutely. But maybe she had taken a photo op where she was pretending to cry while shaking the rails of the Capitol fencing.
For that, when she was at the border and apparently stopped giving a fuck about that the second Biden took power, and then continued to do the exact same Trump policy, and then blocked it, and then only for like a fucking circuit court judge to be like, no, you can't block this. By okay.
Absolutely. God. Anyway, we can probably move on now. One story that I know we wanted to cover that I'm sure a lot of you guys are excited for too is this recent Bad Faith podcast clip. Kim Iversen joining the Bad Faith podcast with Brianna Joy Gray to talk to this trans activist named Esperanza. Not familiar with her work necessarily. I think her name rings a bell, but not super familiar with Esperanza's commentary or her body of work. But anyway, she was invited on the Bad Faith podcast along with Kim Iversen to kind of hash out this whole discussion that has been going on. Obviously, Zach and I commented on it as well, surrounding the dead naming of Elliot Page, Twitter banning Jordan Peterson, even though they didn't really even ban him. They told him if he didn't delete his tweet that his account would be suspended, but his account is still up on Twitter. It's not like he's actually banned. So anyway, that's an aside. Anyway, this is an interesting conversation. Again, Brianna Joy Gray had these two on here to hash out this discussion, this argument. And obviously, they get into like Twitter censorship, as well as like whether or not you have the right to dead name people online, et cetera, et cetera. It's an interesting conversation. I definitely recommend you guys check out the full thing. But unless you had any commentary, Zach, I guess we can just plow right into this.
No, this is going to be a good chat. I think there's a lot to discuss, and yeah, we'll get into these waters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess without further ado, let's just let this play, and we're not going to listen to the entire thing, but probably 5-10 minutes of it worth talking about here. This one's going to be interesting, maybe a little bit spicy. So try to stay sane, everyone in the chat. Let's do our best.
We know chat loves spice.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go.
I'm concerned that hate speech against women, hate speech against transgender people, is going to continue to result in murder and violence against women, against transgender people. And I think that's what we should be concerned about.
I would push back on that a little bit. And I would say that actually the pushback against hate speech is actually causing quite a bit of the violence.
How do you mean, Kim?
I think that when activism reaches a certain point, it starts to aggravate the other side. People that would normally be your ally are now, they become aggravated. The conversation spirals out of control. I think we see that with these, the people are trying to protect certain groups of people, and they say we want to make sure this group of people have these rights, and we're fighting for their rights. But the pendulum swings too far, and it ends up creating a resentment in the rest of the population when somebody who thinks they're on your side, like myself, for example, when, I have never once advocated against any rights for trans folks. In fact, I've been one that says, I don't really care what bathroom anybody uses, use the one you're comfortable using. I don't know why we have to make laws against this. And I'm somebody that's been vocal about that publicly, yet still get labeled a transphobe or any other. And that's not just trans, it's any issue. I mean, we I can call the racist or, any kind of bigoted name. And it's because if you speak up and say anything, then suddenly those that are the activist class, they will come after you. And if you have any disagreement, they label it hate speech. They then say you're a bigot, and then they come after, right? They come after people. So when you come after people like that over and over and say, no, you're not allowed to say this because this is now my definition of hate speech, or this is my definition of being a bigot, and that's what you are now, that's what you're engaging in, it causes resentment in this other group that otherwise would be your ally. And then what ends up happening is that resentment builds up and people start to lash out. And that is what I notice, I think, in society, is that most people, I think, would have just dropped the trans issues. I think a lot of people would have just been like, yeah, whatever. I mean, be who you are. But I think that the push to demonize people, to say, no, but you are not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to do that. If you do that or say that, then now you're a bigot, turns people so off that they join in on the other side and say, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so
Do you want to say something, Zach?
Yeah, dude. Okay, if we could just pause this for a second, because this is just a textbook argument that I would love to unpack, because I think that Kim, one, she's clearly speaking from where she believes, where she's at on this, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people are at the same places where Kim is at on this. So I want to take some time to unpack this exact same argument and how it's been utilized time and time and time again to attack marginalized groups who are simply asking for equality, right? And I want to use the example of racism, because I think that out of all things that we can talk about on the left, people, I hope we don't have anybody that's like a fucking, not on board with like an understanding that racism exists beyond the fact that like, oh, if I don't like call you a racial slur, then I can't possibly be racist. Like, we understand as leftists, and because of American history and all of these structural impediments and barriers and, targeted, demolishing of neighborhoods and, just anything that you could think of, scamming homeowners, all the different things that have happened and been targeted specifically at the Black community outside of, even explicit laws, right? So, in the Jim Crow era, there were explicit laws, right? And you could take somebody like my, like somebody that's like my grandfather on my mom's side, right? Who's a racist piece of shit, right? You could take a guy like him, and he is a total racist piece of shit. I haven't talked to him in like 7 years, like that bad, guys. Like, he's a bad piece of shit for all kinds of reasons, but that's one of them. And he would probably say, oh, well, I don't care who uses the bathroom, but they're still different than me. They're still different than me, right? And it's like, no, we're all the same. We're all fucking people, yada, yada, yada. And then you could see how that person is an obvious racist and how they would not understand the structural elements of racism that are deeply embedded in American culture. And, Gavin, as I mentioned while you were gone, that, you can still be racist even if you're not calling people like slurs, right? And I feel like people are able to have that understanding a little bit, and not everybody, right? We still have a massive mountain to climb on that front. But when it comes to, this argument that Kim is making against, trans folks, like it sounds very similar to that, right? It's like, I'm on your team as long as you're not, so loud and abrasive. And then I do sort of support people retaliating at your community now because you were too loud, or you were too like wrong or abrasive in the way that you like demanded rights for your community. Like, that has so many just like blatant echoes to like every marginalized community that's fought for their rights over time. You know, the gay community the same way. Like, oh, why do you have to talk like that? Why do you have to dress like that? Why do you have to act like a fucking gay guy when you're? Why can't you just act like a normal guy? You know, these kinds of things. Oh, I wouldn't have a problem with the gays if they could just act normal and stay in their own fucking house and all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that's the same rhetoric that homophobic people used, and that's why you're consistently being labeled a transphobe, because you are spouting transphobic rhetoric.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, and I want to be fair here. I don't want to, you know, I don't want people that are listening who agree with Kim to just immediately write us off because, oh, she's a piece of shit, she's a bigot. Like, I do want to actually address this and think through it in a serious way. But essentially, guys, what her argument just boiled down to there was because of the fact that trans people and activists were mean to me on Twitter, therefore I'm now no longer going to advocate for their rights or something. Like, so who cares?
Or that it's justified retaliation.
Or that, but like, who fucking cares? Like, if I said something on this show and some people construed it as racist, for example, and this hasn't happened, but I'm just saying, like, theoretically, if I said something, I slipped up and a bunch of people were like, yo, that was actually low-key racist as fuck. Like, that was super racist. And people were, you know, attacking me on Twitter and saying that I'm a piece of shit and saying that I'm an asshole and saying that I'm a racist. Like, would that suck? Yeah, it would suck. I would be like, damn, that's a real bummer. They misunderstood what I said, and I wasn't, you know, trying to come off that way. And I don't think I'm a racist, but apparently these people do. So now I feel like I'm attacked. Again, that would be a shitty situation. I'm not, you know, envious of anyone that is in that situation. But if that happened to me, I would not then turn around and say, well, now I'm not going to advocate for Black people's rights as much. You know, now I'm not going to advocate for the civil rights of my Black brothers and sisters, my fellow American citizens that happen to have a different skin color than me. That would in no way, again, me being attacked on Twitter would in no way change the way I feel about their struggle and about my participation as an ally in that struggle and as part of being part of the anti-racist movement, which I do consider myself to be. In no way would me being attacked on Twitter because of me slipping up and saying something that was construed as racist, in no way would that affect my reading of the situation. But here in Kim's own words, she says, you know, because of the fact that these activists are so abrasive and they're so aggressive and, you know, they said I was wrong and they said I was transphobic. Well, now I'm considering, you know, fuck them. I'm going to go join the other side. That's essentially what she said. And let's go back a couple seconds just so you know we're not bullshitting before we move on, because there's obviously more to address too. But here's what she said.
What's up happening is that resentment builds up and people start to lash out. And that is what I notice, I think, in society, is that most people, I think, would have just dropped the trans issues. You know, I think a lot of people would have just been like, yeah, whatever. I mean, be who you are. But I think that the push to demonize people, to say, no, but you are not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to do that. If you do that or say that, then now you're a bigot, turns people so off that they join in on the other side and say, yeah, this is. Does that make sense? And
also, it has to be said, shout out to Esperanza, who's sitting here very calmly and politely and having a conversation and doing exactly what Kim says the trans activists won't do. She's saying, well, every time I disagree, every time I say something that's controversial, all of these trans activists come out of the woodwork and attack me and call me a bigot. But meanwhile, you're literally sitting across digitally from a trans activist who is politely and calmly having a conversation with you. She's not attacking you. She's not calling you an asshole. She's not being mean to you. If anything, she's cool as a fucking cucumber, more so than you are, Kim. So what is this? Like, what are you even talking about? What you're talking about is getting attacked on Twitter, and the fact that you don't like to see people be mean to you on Twitter and ratio your stupid ass every time you make some dumb statement. That's what you're talking about. And the fact that that actually has the potential to change your values and the way you feel about a marginalized group's struggle, I think that just really says a lot about your own narcissism, more so than any sort of actual values you have as far as standing with oppressed communities.
Yeah, and I just want to also point out that lashing out that she's describing so like casually, that results in like homicide, murder, alarmingly high death rates, particularly for Black trans women, but of all trans people. So you know, that is what it is.
Yeah, let's take a listen to a little bit more of this, though, because obviously that's not all we wanted to react to, but there was a lot to unpack there, so we apologize.
Yeah, I mean, so Glenn makes a version of this argument, and he talks about Martina Navratilova saying something on Twitter and then getting so much blowback that she kind of increasingly went into kind of TERF territory.
Mean on Twitter.
What is a TERF, by the way?
Trans exclusionary radical feminine. And
what is a TERF, by the way?
Do you really think? Come on, Kim knows what a turf is. I'm not buying this fucking bullshit. You know. Come on.
It's literally an acronym. You can find out what it means on Google in 30 seconds. If you've been called it all night and you've clearly mauling and threatening to sue Mike Figueiredo, you clearly Googled it. I'm sorry, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and again, it's like these people like Kim Iversen, they want to act like being called a turf is some sort of like a slur. Like, how dare you call me a turf? You're just saying that word to win the argument. That's what you see all the time. Well, I don't think you can just call me a word and win the argument that way. It's not just a word, it's a fucking acronym for 4 words. Trans exclusionary radical feminist. And that's an accurate description of a lot of the people that traffic in this kind of rhetoric. It's not even an insult necessarily. It's literally just an accurate description of what these people are. They are people that consider themselves feminists, but don't consider trans women to be part of the same movement. And in many cases, consider the trans movement to be direct contradiction with the feminist movement. That's what it is. It's not a slur. It's not a word that people say just to win an argument. It's literally an accurate description of a lot of people like J.K. Rowling, for example. And Brianna Joy Gray is about to essentially make that point. So again, we're going to shut up and let this play for a little bit.
Trans exclusionary radical feminist. I don't know. Esperanza.
What does that even mean?
It's a kind of feminism that feels like transgender women are a threat to quote unquote biological women, because broadening the definition of what it means to be a woman comes at the expense of certain kind of rights or achievements that have been gained by the feminist movement prior to the inclusion of trans women.
Oh, okay.
Would you say that that's accurate, Esperanza?
So, I mean, essentially, trans exclusionary radical feminism is, like Brianna said, it's a sort of offshoot of radical feminism that believes that the rights of trans people are in, direct formal contradiction with the rights of women, which they consider to be a class. But, just to be fair, Kim, I think that one of the reasons why people were calling you transphobic was because, one, you were attempting to argue for the right to dead name transgender people. And 2, because, you speak on trans issues without having necessarily even done basic investigation. For example, arguing on Twitter that if a trans child doesn't ask for puberty blockers, that they're in a phase. You didn't even know what the acronym TERF standed for. And I think that this is a part of a broader problem with political commentary in our country, where there's no rigorous investigation demanded as a prerequisite to speak on issues. And you have people who are influencing public opinion who don't even do basic research. And I think that that's a big problem.
Do you not think that there is an increase in children, young or teens,
Burn.
saying that they feel that they're non-binary, or that they feel like they're the other gender? I mean, are we seeing an increase in that? And I guess then the question is that an increase because of because it's a phase? I mean, I do think that teenagers go through phases. I think that's I don't think I need to do
Where have we heard that
more
before?
research on that to know that. I think most of us know that teenagers go through phases. What they then choose to make their phase tends to be the fad of the era. That is how it is. It doesn't diminish or it doesn't diminish the fact that that whatever it is they're latching on to exists and is a reality for certain groups of people. It just means that they're saying, oh, okay, well, that's me now. That's what I feel like. I'm maybe, and it could be any number of things, or any number of things that they want to try out, or any number of things they want to do. So I don't know, certainly I guess there would be a question on, is there an increase in kids coming out and saying to their parents, I'm feeling a certain way? Is there an increase of that because the society's more open, or is it, and so they feel like they can say things? And I know that's been an argument in the past, for example, about whether or not somebody if they feel like they can come out as gay or something, or is that, or do you think that there's some influence in society? And I think that is where what I was coming from. But to be labeled a transphobe for expressing an opinion, I think, is my ultimate and overall problem with, and what I'm saying about the activist group that constantly then goes after people and says, well, now you're a bigot because you asked a question or because you have a thought. I can disagree with somebody. And this is what kind of the overall problem I had with the with that segment going viral and people then calling me names, is that we've reached a point in society, and it's not new. This is happening. It's new. It's newer on the left. It used to happen a lot on the right, but we've reached a point where, if you question anything, if you just say, look, I don't agree, suddenly I'm a bigot. But why can't I not be a bigot and not agree with you?
Well, and I want to say too that, we could
I don't want to keep interrupting this, right? But I'm just like, I don't understand. Like, you can't just demand that people aren't going to respond to your commentary or your opinion a certain way. You do not have that right, Kim. Why can't I say something that is super offensive and then not have people get mad at me? I don't know. That's not how the fucking world works, because just how you're allowed to say something offensive, we're allowed to be like, yo, what the fuck is the matter with you? Why did you say that? And more importantly, why do you actually seem to believe it? Does that, I mean, you know what I mean? And she seems to just be like, I want to be able to say something that a bunch of other people feel is discriminatory and bigoted and borderline hateful, right? Or at times definitely hateful and deeply problematic. Like, guys, we're not over exaggerating here. Like, she just got completely bodied and didn't even attempt to respond to the fact that she hadn't done basic homework on this. But it just dug her heels in the ground and was like, well, why can't I just ask these questions without being considered a bigot? There are all kinds of questions that if you fucking in all earnesty ask them in the year of our Lord 2022, people are going to have some concerns about you, and it's their fucking right to respond to it.
And regardless of even her saying anything offensive, it's not a new thing where if you say something controversial online, people are going to respond in turn. Like, yeah, if I went on Twitter right now and started talking about some controversial subject matter, I can expect to get a lot of replies and people disagreeing with me in an intense way. Take any subject matter that's controversial. And yeah, again, it's nothing new. Yeah, you put your sentiment out on the internet about a controversial subject matter and you expect no one to respond and to not get any heated emotional responses out of that. Where the fuck have you been? Where the fuck have you been? And you don't think trans people receive the same sort of response? Their very existence is controversial. Watch a trans live streamer and watch their chat and all the horrible, things that are said to them. I'm sure Esperanza could tell you about a million instances in which she's put out a statement online and a bunch of fucking transphobes responded to her. Again, it's not anything new to post something online that's controversial and then get responses accordingly. It's really nothing new.
I also just want to add that it's not even unique to the online world. Like this idea that, and now it's just more applicable to everyone. You used to have to be a much larger public figure to say something and then get massive amounts of public derision. But if you go back to the Bush era where the internet was much less social media driven, if at all, really, and you look at the Dixie Chicks, now the Chicks, right? I mean, they said a bunch of shit, in France about the Bush war, and then they got canceled back in America, and there was all kinds of derision or whatever. They were actually on the right side of history. Right. So this isn't, and I guess that's a weird analogy, but all I'm saying is that this phenomenon of people saying something unpopular and getting a fuck ton of backlash for it, it's just a fact of life and yes, on and off the internet.
Right. And we experience the same thing. Like when we talk about these issues, again, when we talk about controversial issues, which right now the trans issue is a controversial issue, look at our fucking comments. We get a bunch of hate comments and people calling us pieces of shit and people saying that we don't know what we're talking about and people calling us bigots and all this stuff. Like, it happens to everyone, Kim. If you're going to talk about the subject matter, then you can expect this to happen.
Yeah, I don't even like calling it the trans issue, right? Like that just has a weird right wing, not to call you out for it, but I was just that's what we're arguing. The fact that you have to debate someone's identity as an issue right now, I don't like that framing at all. It's so fucked up. It's where we are. But shouldn't that be a telltale sign that you're on the wrong side of this fucking argument?
Discuss the reasons why, for example, younger adults are more likely than older adults to identify as transgender. We could discuss those trends, but there needs to be a level of rigor, a level of scientific rigor that is demanded of people who have platforms, who are influencing public opinion. Otherwise, these conversations are just going to be like a sheet that you hold up in the wind, and whichever the way the wind blows, your opinion is going to be influenced. And that could be extremely harmful, especially when you're talking about a group such as transgender people who are disproportionately discriminated against, harassed, and killed in our society. And again, that's why I think, let's not be juvenile here. I get hate all the time on Twitter, but we can't pretend like that's the reason that, violence against transgender people exists. I mean, the state has repressed transgender people and gender variant, gender diverse people since before the trans movement ever arose. So, historically speaking, that just simply cannot be the reason for anti-trans violence, right? Because it existed before the activist movement did.
Well, let me see if I can tease out a couple of things here. So I think that everyone receives hate online for various things, but I will say this: I've had like claims that I'm anti-Semitic pylons 2 or 3 times in the last year. My crime being, in one instance, interviewing a young woman who went undercover, wrote a book about going undercover and dating Nazis to find out more about them and basically dox them. And she was frustrated with the way the interview was going and ended the interview abruptly. And then when I posted it anyway, telling her that she would either finish it, but I was going to have to post it, she made all these claims about me on the internet. I've had conversations with Norm Finkelstein about his attitude to discussing Holocaust denial. And although both of his parents were Holocaust survivors, he feels very strongly that people need to discuss Holocaust denial and not just ignore it, because if you ignore it, it has an opportunity to fester in the world, and people have had problems with those kinds of discussions, and on and on and on. But I will say, despite me having a desire to, like, it comes up frequently, these trans issues, I always cringe and kind of don't want to talk about it, because I do feel there's a sensitivity there, and maybe it's a warranted sensitivity. I'm not complaining here, but there does seem to be a little bit of a sensitivity that's out of step with my experiences with accusations of racism or anti-Semitism. And look, my stance on, let's say, racism, since that's my wheelhouse, is I might make a generalized statement. I have in the past and other times in my life said things like, yeah, well, we live in a racist society. Everybody's a little bit racist. Everybody's racist. But I tend to be very careful about actually calling individuals racist, because I know that it can be a little bit of a boy who cries wolf situation. And I know that my credibility hinges on me making accurate assessments of what is and isn't racism. And so one of the things that I often argue is that when people talk about Donald Trump as a racist, they should be very specific. They should avoid examples like the Mexicans Mexico isn't sitting their best, because to people who aren't inclined to see him as a racist, they see that as an obvious statement. Yeah, of course, people who are so precarious.
By the way, that was an obviously racist statement.
Are not.
Oh yeah, sorry, it was a little bit laggy, but yeah, that was obviously a racist statement by Donald Trump. I don't think that's necessarily the best example to give, although I understand what Bree's saying.
Yeah, I was just going to push back on the idea that you have to be super sensitive when you talk about trans issues. Giving trans people rights. I never felt that way. I've never I've never gotten anything but just like, hey, thank you for fucking doing this. Like, or, and then you feel all weird and shit, because it's like, well, you shouldn't fucking praise somebody for just fucking having the common courtesy to be like, give everybody rights. You know what I'm saying? But I've never gotten, emails from people being like, you aren't properly articulating like the trans experience. Because I couldn't possibly do that, right? Like I've never, I'm not trans. Like I live the life of a cisgendered male in middle America, but like, we still fucking like, hey, we're going to be firm at line in the sand in this. And we've never gotten any pushback or hate or said that we said things that were insensitive at all. Like I've said, we've only heard either you guys are fucking blah, 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 like bullshit, like people who are TERFs, or, like people being like, yeah, this is good. So I just, it's not been our experience at all that we've like, just tried our best to defend the trans community, but they just keep coming after us for good-natured mistakes. Like, that's how you know it's a talking point. Because Gavin and I don't watch our mouths about fucking anything. We're really not that, I don't consider myself to be an expert in gender issues, period. But I just think common sense will go a long way here. Having, a good conscience will go a long way here. Being empathetic to other people's struggle will go a long way here. And I just feel like people act like it's so hard when it's so easy.
And again, like, we're not out here calling everyone a bigot or calling everyone a racist all the time. But that being said, if you look at this example that Brianna says, obviously Trump saying that Mexico is sending drug dealers and rapists and that it's not the best Obviously, that's fucking racism. Just like a lot of the stuff that people call transphobic is obviously and undeniably transphobic. Like, what? Sometimes you have to call a spade a spade. What happened to just being honest and shooting from the hip? What's with all this coded language? Oh, I don't want to offend these racist people. No, if someone's being racist, then I'm going to call them fucking racist. And by the way, if I'm ever being racist, if I say something that's accidentally racist, feel free to call me out on it. I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to evolve and grow. Like, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't mean that. Anyway.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I don't, like I said, I just think it's a little bit easier of an issue than people make it out.
Quote unquote, the best, whatever that means, as economically advantaged, as educated, as whatever it is. And when you could then call him racist for that, your credibility in calling things that are actually racist diminished. So I completely agree with your point about needing to be more informed.
What is actually racist, by the way, if that's not? Like if saying Mexico isn't sending their best, they're sending drug dealers and rapists. If that's not racist, then what can you call racist? Like literally just people using the N-word? Like, is that where you draw the line? Like, I don't know.
Often feel very ill-informed in this space. And sometimes on the Hill, I think the way it's structured, topics are thrown at us that we don't always know the most about. And that's kind of a problem in the broader media ecosystem and the 7-minute clips and all of this stuff. But do you think there's something else going on here where there seems to be perhaps a sensitivity, a more narrow policing of what it means to be kind of in compliance as not transphobic than in some of the other phobias? Where Kim, let's say, saying, defending, saying that Twitter shouldn't ban people for dead naming folks while not dead naming folks herself and saying that she would never dead name folks herself is kind of collapsed with someone like Jordan Peterson, who is, I would argue, very fairly described as a bigot, who intentionally was dead naming Elliot Page because he wants to be hurtful to him, et cetera. Like, do you think there's some danger in collapsing someone like Kim, even if you disagree with her stance on issues, and someone like Jordan Peterson?
Well, first, I just have to address the example that you made because, I just want to say that I think the example of Donald Trump saying, Mexico doesn't send its best and what people might think. I think that if you are, willing to risk your life in order to make a better life for yourself and your children, then you are the best in whatever.
Of course. I'm obviously trying to.
I understand,
and I appreciate you saying that, but it's that kind of, I don't know. It's frustrating because this is why it's so difficult to have these conversations, especially in a 7-minute, little 10-minute internet clip, and that's why I really appreciate you both being here and having this show. But it is frustrating because there is sometimes it feels like no good faith understanding that I am who I am and I've said what I've said and my beliefs are what they are, to be able to have some of the difficult conversations. Like, how are conservatives understanding language? What are they hearing without it being attributed to one's own belief? And I think that's a little bit of what happened to Kim, right? Her saying Jordan Peterson, shouldn't be banned on Twitter is not the same thing as saying that I agree with what Jordan Peterson is saying or would adopt the same language practices.
Yeah. I mean, I just, again, that's just simply not a concern to me. I mean, to be honest, if you are arguing for the right to dead name trans people, I really don't care if you're being labeled.
Is that what's being done, Esperanza?
Well,
is Kim arguing for the right to dead name people or arguing against Twitter's ability to censor people for doing so?
Well, I mean, arguing against Twitter's ability to censor people from dead naming people is arguing for the right to dead name people. I mean, it's
on
just
Twitter. Yeah, I don't know, but the attribution there is that Kim wants to dead name people, right?
Oh, no,
There's
I'm
a difference,
not concerned
right?
with personal intent. I mean, whether or not you or Kim or me or anybody wants to dead name someone is not my concern. I don't care about intention. I'm saying the ability to dead name someone on a social media platform. If you argue that we should be able to do that, then yes, you're arguing for the right to dead name people. And again, I think that in a world where transgender people are disproportionately murdered, we're cut out from the formal economy, we face housing discrimination, violence, in all forms. I mean, why are we worried about the right of someone like Jordan Peterson to dead name people? There are broader issues that we should be concerned with.
What do you think about that, Gavin?
Yeah, I don't know. What do you make of that, Kim?
I would
There we go. Yeah, so I have mixed opinions on this whole issue about Twitter. You guys know me. I'm essentially a free speech absolutist. I think that the First Amendment should apply to large social media platforms like Twitter, like YouTube. But unfortunately, it doesn't right now. It doesn't. We unfortunately don't live in a country where we've taken the steps to nationalize the digital public square and regulate them in accordance with the First Amendment. And this is actually something that Esperanza pointed out at the beginning of the interview. She said, if you really care about forcing Twitter to operate within the First Amendment, then you should be advocating for the abolition of capitalists and the system that allows private companies like Twitter to get as big as they do and then to enforce their TOS as they see fit. So again, if you really care about this stuff, then you should be advocating for Twitter to be nationalized so that it can be regulated in accordance with the First Amendment. However, that's not what Kim's advocating for. She says at one point in this interview that she is a capitalist. So she's clearly not advocating for that. And if you're a capitalist, then why do you have a problem with a private company enforcing their terms of service as they see fit? So again, I'm not a capitalist. I think that Twitter should be nationalized. I think it should be regulated within the First Amendment. But that's not what Kim thinks, and that's not what Kim's advocating for. She's just saying that me, because I feel this way, should be able to enforce Twitter's TOS as I see fit instead of how they see fit, even though it's their company, even though it's a private company, even though I have no say over it. She wants them to regulate it in accordance with her ideology, not the way they want to, even though she also is simultaneously a capitalist who seemingly would think private companies can be able to do what they want. So I don't really get her argument here. And again, even though I care deeply about censorship on social media companies, Esperanza is not a censorship advocate or activist. She's a trans activist. Her main priorities are clearly the well-being of the trans community. That's clearly something she cares more about than how Twitter is enforcing their TOS. So yeah, it's just a matter of prioritization. In the same way that Kim Iversen clearly cares more about censorship than she does about the well-being of the trans community, Esperanza cares more about the well-being of her community than the TOS of Twitter and other social media companies. So again, I just think it kind of breaks down into a prioritization, which one you prioritize more. But I understand why Esperanza, who again, her main concern, her main goal as an activist is that of the well-being of her own community. I can understand why that would take precedence over a private company enforcing their TOS as they see fit, even if that's not how I would enforce the TOS.
Yeah, I think the Twitter thing is unique, right? Because or interesting rather, and I think the fact that the argument has been presented in the way that it has shows how weak of a case the like free speech, like our rights are under attack, folks case or weak of a case those folks have, right? Because this isn't necessarily a free speech issue so much as it's a oligarchical control issue. Right. As we've talked about, it's the fact that Twitter, this massive conglomerate, is able to dictate what we say on this massive platform. Right. So if you're not addressing that problem, you're not serious. Right. And what creates that problem? Monopoly, capitalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all things that we can easily pinpoint. And the argument that they should be having if they wanted to be more honest. Right. Was should Twitter be allowed to have a TOS that allows slurs? Should you be able to get in trouble by Twitter if you slur somebody? And this could be a slur of any kind. I'm not talking specifically a racial slur. It could be an ableist slur. It could be, a slur about your sexuality, right? Should you be allowed to call, people the F slur, if they're, gay guys or whatever, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? That's really what's happening, right? Because what Esperanza is making the case for is that dead naming somebody is akin to slurring them, right? Which is an argument that I'm sympathetic to, right? I'll put my cards on the table. I would agree with that. That dead naming somebody is intentionally.
It might even be worse.
Yeah, it's an intentional way of dehumanizing them and invalidating them and all these kinds of things that are fucking, right? Okay, we're on the same page about that. So if we're on the same page about the fact that Twitter should be allowed to enforce a no slur policy on their platform if they choose to, then you can't be upset that you can't dead name somebody, right? Like if you're gonna argue that you should be allowed to slur somebody, you got to go for the fucking whole, you just that would be more ethically consistent. And there are a lot of free speech people out there that would be like, yeah, you should be able to say literally anything and I wouldn't censor a goddamn thing. Fine, take that position and debate it, but don't like, you know, just skirt around it and use this one like super fringe issue regarding marginalized people because you know it's the most popular way of framing your argument when it's really disingenuous.
Yeah, and to be fair to Kim, she might actually support people being able to use slurs on social media.
Right. But I just mean she should make that whole case then, right? Instead of just narrowly presenting it through this lens.
That's fair. And also, I just have an issue with the whole framing of this conversation, which is that no one's actually being banned on Twitter for dead naming. If I went on Twitter right now and said, you know, Elliot Page, the actor formerly known as blank, I don't think I would get banned. I really don't. I've seen people do that. I've seen people use the dead names of trans people many times on Twitter, even recently. They're still on Twitter, guys. They still are. The reason why Jordan Peterson got suspended, not even banned, is because he was being incredibly violently transphobic, calling Elliot Page's gender-affirming surgery criminal and using his dead name. So just a vile, incredibly transphobic and bigoted tweet. Again, I'm not saying that that people should get banned from Twitter. I'm not saying that. Obviously, I am a free speech absolutist, so I'm not saying I would enforce the TOS the way that they do. But let's at least be honest about why he got banned. It's not just for dead naming, and even the whole framing of this conversation is honestly a little bit disingenuous. Should Twitter ban Jordan Peterson for dead naming? He didn't get banned for dead naming. Again, not only did he dead name Elliot Page, he also called Elliot Page's gender-affirming surgery criminal, and was just obviously violently bigoted and transphobic. So that's why he got banned, not just for saying Elliot Page's former name. I really don't think he would have been banned if that were the case.
No, I don't think so either. And furthermore, again, I don't know. I just think that if you're not willing to address the fact that the real problem is that we, the people, do not have control over what our own speech can be, what we decide is appropriate, because, you know, people will say enforce it like we enforce the First Amendment. Okay, well, guess what? There's tweaks that you can make to the First Amendment. You can't go into small rural towns in Kansas and, you know, start shouting fucking profanities. They will literally put your ass in jail under like civility crimes, right? Town ordinances about decency and shit like that. That's real. And those cases have been already taken all the way up to the Supreme Court, and towns like, yep, you can't do that. You can't just scream profanities. Or
I mean, even in Kansas City, if I just went to a restaurant, like a nice restaurant, and started like yelling the N-word or something, do you think they would let me stay there?
Well, no, exactly. They wouldn't let you stay there, but they also, I don't know if they'd be able to arrest you if you like followed somebody around though and like consistently.
But no one's arresting people on Twitter. They're just kicking them off.
Right.
That's, hence my example.
Right. But I was just saying, you know, even in real fucking situations where you have your full First Amendment rights, you would still get some sort of like a harassment charge. You know, and that's oh, I was just speaking. Oh no, you can't harass somebody, right? So all of these types of things I feel like get left out of the free speech argument. Like when Gavin and I say we're free speech people, we still include all of those regulations that we have about our own First Amendment, right? Like I don't think you should be able to like target and harass somebody, right? Which is why a TOS matters on Twitter, because you don't actually have to go up to somebody. You know, you can get, you know, 10,000 fuckers that are all Jordan Peterson stands to dead name, you know, a person that they've never met and, you know, should have never had any fucking problem with.
Yeah. And again, just to be 100% clear on the issue, I don't necessarily agree with the way Twitter currently enforces its TOS. I think that it should act in accordance with the First Amendment. That is my position. But again, I also acknowledge the fact that in order to get there, the only way to achieve that is to be advocating for Twitter's to be nationalized so that it can be regulated within the First Amendment. Because guess what? The First Amendment only applies. It doesn't apply to fucking private companies. It doesn't apply to private corporations like Twitter. So if you're interested in regulating Twitter in accordance with the First Amendment, then you should be calling for it to be nationalized and regulated within the First Amendment. I don't see what this whole thing, oh, we're going to fucking shake our hands because a private company is enforcing their TOS. Then advocate for it to be nationalized. Until it is, you don't have any fucking say in the matter. It's not your company. And you're a capitalist, by the way. You're a literal capitalist. So this is how you want the system to be set up. You approve of this.
Yep.
Say that in order to have the rights you seek, you need my help. That's the bottom line. You need my help. You need Brianna's help. You need Jordan Peterson's help. You need everybody's help because you're in a minority group. And so being in a minority,
Did you hear that? Yeah, we got to take this back to full speed or regular speed. Let's go back and just, all right.
you
people. There are broader issues that we should be concerned with.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you make of that, Kim?
I would say that in order to have the rights you seek, you need my help. That's the bottom line. You need my help. You need Brianna's help. You need Jordan Peterson's help. You need everybody's help because you're in a minority group. And
Yeah. So if you want our help, if you want your rights, you're gonna have to be a little bit nicer. You're gonna have to stop calling me names on Twitter, or else me and Jordan Peterson, we're not gonna afford you those rights that you want, those cute little rights you want. Oh, sorry, you better be a little bit nicer to me, or else you ain't gonna get them.
Wow, Gavin, I can't believe you're using misogynist behavior to troll this woman who's bravely speaking out for the rights of women.
But seriously, that is a crazy argument.
so being in a minority group, you cannot obtain that right yourself without the help of people who are not in your group. So I think my overall problem, and not just with this particular issue, but all issues in general where people get labeled a slur, is that those people you're labeling are the very people you need in order to gain this right. This is how, in order for the civil rights movement to have happened, Black people needed the help of white people. That's just the way it is. So if you were a Black person during that time, it wouldn't be wise to go around to every white person and say, you're privileged, you are, and make enemies, right? To like call them names and to make enemies.
This woman's just out here pretending that Malcolm X never existed. Like straight up just pretending that he was never out here doing exactly what she said that Black people should have never done. Okay.
But don't you get it, Zach? If the Black people, if the people like Malcolm X had just been a little bit less aggressive, then maybe Black people would have got their rights way sooner, Maybe it was that aggression that actually held them back. That's what she's saying, Zach.
I don't think that's what she's saying, but I think that
It is what she's saying.
I mean, I guess that is what she's saying. Anyway, all I'm saying is that Malcolm X did literally the opposite of that, and he was perhaps one of, if not the most, among the most effective Black liberation leaders.
And I'm saying that her argument is literally that he should have been less aggressive and more kind, and that they would have gotten their rights sooner as a result. That's the same argument she's making.
No, it is. Yeah, literally it is.
Yeah. Of them when you need their help. So I would caution, I would say, any activist movement and say, try your best not to turn the people you absolutely need, and that is not even negotiable. You need my help. Don't piss us off to the level where we just say, I don't care anymore about you. And I think that's what happens. And that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
How can you say that? How could you literally say that?
Happens. And that's what I mean. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so first of all, I have to say that you weren't being labeled a slur. Transphobe is not a slur.
How's that not a slur? That sounds like a slur to me.
Well, what does it mean to you,
actually,
Esperanza?
It's actually incredibly juvenile to say that transphobe is a slur. But secondly, we don't actually need you, Kim. You could disappear from, the world tomorrow, and the trans movement will still continue. So let's not overstate your importance.
I'm not talking about me personally. I was talking
You
about.
literally said, "Oh, you guys need me and Jordan Peterson." Yeah. I'm sure the trans community really needs you guys. I'm sure they really need you to help them so fucking bad. Anyway, we do have some other clips to move on to. I want to move on from this. So check out the rest of the debate. Check out the full debate if you want. It was a good conversation. Obviously, it is what it is. We've made our opinion more than clear. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oof. That was a doozy. That was such a doozy. Also, if transphobe is a slur, then like all kinds of things are slurs. That like any criticism of you is a slur. Then any like I don't know. That's not the same.
Yeah, and it's really not. And a lot of people don't want to hear this, but it is possible to do like racist things without being a racist or realizing you're racist, in the same way that you can say or do transphobic things without intentionally or knowingly being transphobic. Like, again, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. But yeah, if you're like, sometimes you have to have these things pointed out to you, and then you realize, oh, okay, like now I understand, have some conversations with the community, realize like how you were expressing yourself came off to that community, and then change course if you're interested in no longer being labeled such. Or if not, then just own it. But that's kind of the crossroads you're at here. And again, like, if someone was just making like a a really racist joke or something, but they didn't really realize that it was racist, then you might have to say like, oh, that's actually low key kind of racist. And they're like, well, I love black people. Like I would never advocate for segregation or slavery. Well, obviously, but that doesn't mean you still weren't saying something that was a little bit bigoted, right? Or that was based in stereotypes, for example. And that's not the end of the world. I'm not saying that person should be canceled or fucking sent to jail or anything, but sometimes people just point these things out. Get over it.
Opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure I've said things on this show that people in the comments have said, hey, you might want to rephrase that next time. And they were probably 100% right. Because guess what? When you're speaking off the cuff, like you end up making mistakes, sometimes subconsciously, sometimes without realizing it. Sometimes you just slip up and it happens. And then you, again, adjust course if you're interested in that or not. And then you move on into the story. I don't get what the fucking big deal is here.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, we can move on. We spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, we did spend a good amount of time on that. So thanks everyone for sticking with us and suffering through that. We did get a couple super chats. Did want to address real quick before we move on to our final couple stories. Thank you so much, Nima, for the $5. Did you guys catch AOC and Ilhan wearing invisible handcuffs? It was a photo op. We covered that earlier in the stream, Nima. So rewind a little bit and check that out. But thanks for the $5.
Gavin also got a photo op with the police one time. You can hear all about.
Unfortunately, I didn't get a photo. That's the problem. I wish I did. Anyway, thank you, Nima. And that happened twice, by the way. Thank you, Nima. Thank you also, Beffer. Thank you so much for the $1.99. Did y'all listen to the call-in after? No, we have not. So I'll check that out. I'd be interested to hear how the conversation developed. Was it just Brianna on there, or was it Kim and Esperanza as well? Either way, I'll definitely check it out when I get a minute. I'm sure it would be thoroughly fascinating, just like that conversation was itself.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would definitely listen to it. Bree has so much stamina on call-in. Holy shit, she'll go for 4 fucking hours. Gavin and I are like 45-minute kind of guys. So anyway,
even on the stream, we've been going for longer than usual.
Oh, I know. I'm like, all right, it's time to let's get going. But anyway, thanks so much, Buffer, and I'll check it out. Thank you so much. We love you too. And don't hate me, but I also love AOC. You can love whoever you want, as long as you are okay with us giving you the harsh reality and the cold, bitter truth.
Yeah, thanks so much, P and you. Really appreciate the $4.99. And yeah, so glad you enjoyed the show. Thanks so much. Thank you also, Mariposa. Kim from the beginning of that clip is gaslighting. She is complaining about trans TW, trans women, a marginalized group that has less power and influence than Kim has. That's certainly true. Kim is acting like, she's being canceled or whatever, when in reality it's just some people making fun of her on Twitter and calling her out.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks so much for the super chat, and yeah, we kind of agree.
Also, this reminds me, before we move on to the next story, because obviously Kim wants to make it all about free speech. That's what she really cares about. That's her main concern. All she cares about is the First Amendment, et cetera, et cetera. Let's remember, guys, it was literally about a week ago, I guess 10 or 11 days ago, that Kim Iversen threatened to sue a YouTuber for criticizing her and calling her transphobic. So you don't give a shit about the First Amendment. You don't give a fuck about censorship, Kim Iversen. And this proved it. This exposed you. Anyone that knows anything about the First Amendment, let alone cares about it, would never threaten to sue some YouTuber for criticizing them. Absolutely ridiculous. Completely undermines any credibility she has as far as being a free speech warrior whatsoever. This woman is a complete and utter fucking joke, and honestly an enemy to the First Amendment.
And just again, not super well read on it either, because if she'd taken the time to look at the history of these kinds of lawsuits, you'd know how frivolous they are. But anyway.
Yeah, so frivolous, in fact, that usually when people wage these kind of legal battles, they end up having to pay the legal fees of their opponent because it's so frivolous. So anyway, this is the person who claims to care so much about the First Amendment and free speech. She's a charlatan, and again, she's a literal enemy of free speech, if that's what you care about, just so you know. But to move on to the next super chat, let me find it. Thank you so much, Eric Bruno. Esperanza called Jamie Peck a liberal. It was hilarious. She's really funny. That is hilarious. I like Jamie Peck. I don't really listen to her much because she's not like on the Majority Report or anywhere else that I know of. I think she has a podcast, but I like Jamie Peck from what I've heard of her. But that is funny that Esperanza is seemingly even more of a radical herself.
Yeah, I'm actually not super familiar with Jamie Peck, but I've seen her tweet funny things on Twitter, so that's all I really know. LOL.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thank you, BW in Wisconsin, for the 25, powering the Vanguard with boomer dollars. Fuck
doing
yeah.
the Jackson Hinkle.
Thank you so much, BW. Really appreciate that $25. Really love our boomer viewers. We genuinely do. And thank you so much. Really appreciate that kind and super generous donation. We love the fact that you're enjoying the show. And again, that donation means a lot to us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we got a lot of love for our boomer and elderly. Not that the boomers are elderly yet. Well, some of them are. I don't know how long the fucking boomer generation lasts. But anyway, some people, they roast us for using boomer as a derogatory, but you guys are actually some of our favorite Vanguardians. So anyway, appreciate you being in the comment section.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, BW. And thank you, Christina. AOC is a total fraud. She claimed she was willing to be in office for 4 years and get everything on her platform. She'll be in that seat for life. Actually, Christina, she said that she'd be willing to be a one-term congressman, or congresswoman, rather. That means 2 years. Yeah. So not only did she say she was willing to sacrifice, her career for doing the right thing, she's literally said, I will be a one-term congresswoman. And obviously, even if you like AOC, you have to admit that she's clearly put her career above seriously challenging power.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been the bummer that we've been kind of chronicling our entire time as a podcast. Dead naming, I don't know if you can say that it, directly causes it. I think a general hatred of trans people and all kinds of reasons, societal reasons, lead to violence against marginalized groups, but it certainly contributes to the dehumanization of an already massively vulnerable group in a way that Gavin and I both find completely unacceptable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Generally, just the culture of transphobia, which dead naming is an aspect of, that does cause violence. Obviously, one single person saying one single transphobic thing, it's hard to make a direct link between that and violence, but it's just a general culture of transphobia. But anyway, thank you, Isaiah, for the $2. Appreciate you chiming in. Thank you also, Victor, once again, for the $4.99. I think it's dishonest to characterize Kim's capitalism with her supporting Twitter, that she has said multiple times she wants Twitter regulated. Well, if you want Twitter regulated, then how are you a capitalist? Because you know what capitalism is? It means putting profit above literally everything else. It means prioritizing profit above everything else. So guess what Twitter has decided is in the interest of their profits? It's banning problematic people or suspending their accounts for saying offensive or controversial things. That's what they feel is in the interest of their profit. And that is what capitalism means. So you literally can't be a capitalist, in my opinion, if you support regulating Twitter. That's not capitalism at that point.
Yeah, I mean, a more U.S. mixed market capitalism, which always ends up supporting oligarchs and to begin with. And the reason that, people will say there's a capitalist, but they still support regulation of Twitter is just because, again, it all comes back to people being mean to them on Twitter, right? Oh, like it's the same reason why Josh Hawley wants to regulate Twitter. Do you think Josh Hawley is concerned with the oligarchic class? No, of course not. He wants to regulate it because they took Donald Trump off Twitter and because a bunch of people were mean to him on there. And that's why it's not a serious criticism if you're not going to, get all the way down with the crux of the issue, which is obviously capital. But thank you so much for your perspective, Victor. We do appreciate that in the $4.99 contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you also, Elizabeth. Shout out to you, Elizabeth. I know we're mutuals on Twitter. Always enjoy your tweets. You guys are doing a great job as a mother of a trans daughter. We need more voices like yours who are educated on the issues. Thank you. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for the super chat and for chiming in. We're really glad you're enjoying our content and our show. And obviously, we just consider it our duty to stand up for, to defend any marginalized community, of course, the trans community in general. Plus, Zach and I have trans friends, so it's a personal issue for us. Of course, we're going to stand up for the rights of all of our comrades, including the trans community.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. We'll get comments that are like, I used to like you until you started standing up for marginalized communities. It's like, okay, we'll get the fuck out because I'm not going to miss you. I'll let the door hit you on the fucking ass.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Really, really appreciate that. So glad you're enjoying the show, the content. Thank you, Mariposa. Again, you guys nailed it today. New to your channel, and this trans woman loves y'all. Hey, well, thank you so much, Mariposa. Welcome to the Vanguard, comrade. Really appreciate the fact that you're enjoying the show, and thanks so much for chipping in financially and sending us a kind comment. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jonathan Boyle, for the $5, getting all kinds of support today. Thank you, Jonathan. Keep up the good work, guys. Love the positivity.
Yeah, and shout out
positivity.
And shout out to Jonathan for being a long time commenter, chatter. We recognize you. You've been holding it down for a long time, an OG Vanguarder. So appreciate you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. Really, really appreciate that. As always, And thank you, Eric, for the $5. Money towards converting the van to an electric vehicle. Well, stay tuned, guys, because we do have an announcement that's related to that. So thank you so much, Eric. Really, really appreciate that. And yeah, we can move on.
Yeah, the van market right now is massively fucking inflated because of COVID, and the car market is destroyed. So I don't even want to think about how much an electric van would cost. So unfortunately, we will be gas powered for the time being. But anyway, yeah, that would be dope if one day we got to get an electric powered van.
Yeah, that'd be lit. So we do have one more quick story. I know Zach has to get out of here in a second, so we'll try to move fast. But this caught my eye browsing Reddit yesterday on the Vaush subreddit, r/Vaush, one that I like to lurk on sometimes. You never know what interesting drama is going to unfold over on r/VaushV. But this is pretty funny, guys. So here's a commenter saying, Vaush bad. Am I alone here? Split on how Vaush treated that commenter at the end of yesterday's stream. I get that people feeling entitled to someone's stream content can be annoying, but in all fairness, kind of dry lately. Also, this shit isn't a game. We want people we're donating to and supporting to perform well. It's not personal. Essentially, or especially because this motherfucker is obviously built differently than others. Most leftists I know that share this critique only want to take advantage of that. His response was basically go somewhere else. I've watched this guy from the beginning, and the answer is yes. His content is weaker and more sporadic, even from more than a year ago. His finger isn't quite on it like it was, from the enthusiasm of having to work at all to the constructiveness and timeliness of political takes in general, in my humble opinion, of course. And of course, if this was just a one-off post, then probably wouldn't be worth commenting on. But this is actually a lot of how Vaush's community feels. You'll see people talking about this a fair amount on his subreddit, which is always a good way to, check the pulse of a community. But, if you even just look at the comments here, here's one that says, new fans, go back and watch a 2019 stream and see the difference for yourself. It's like watching a literal different person. Used to be so much more genuine, more funny, just all around better. He's still good, but it's just so different now. Anyone remember the Theory arc, the Blood Sports, good times? And again, you guys, I mean, if you watch the Vanguard, if you know anything about our takes and our commentary, you'll know that we've had a myriad of criticisms with Vaush. So many criticisms with Vaush, especially when it comes to foreign policy. I think there's some issues that obviously Zach and I do agree with him on, but still a lot of issues that just hardcore disagree with Vaush on, especially as it relates to foreign policy. Also, as far as it relates to voting for fucking pieces of shit like Joe Biden. But, that's a conversation that hopefully we'll hash out someday together. Anyway, I do think it's interesting that a lot of people here feel that, Vaush's content has kind of become stale, and not just in the topics he's covering, but also just like the, general presentation, the general energy behind it, the way he talks, the way he relates to his audience and to other people he has on. Again, it's interesting because this is something I noticed, but it's not something I necessarily thought other people were feeling as well. But again, it turns out a lot of people do. Again, if you go back to 2019, for example, a couple of years ago, just had a different energy. He seemed more enthusiastic. And of course, this is something that a lot of commentators are going to come up against once they've been in the game for a while. Eventually, the shtick gets tired. You got to switch things up, and it just becomes kind of exhausting. It becomes your job rather than your passion. So obviously, that's stuff that Zach and I are thinking about and trying to make sure we never become stale. But I do think it's interesting to see Vaush's community. I wouldn't say they're like revolting against him or anything like that. But it does seem like a lot of them are kind of calling out the fact that his content has gotten stale. His presentation has become a little bit like rote. It seems like he doesn't care as much. It seems like he's not as into it necessarily. And a lot of people just, saying he's not in peak Vaush form, which again, despite my disagreements with the guy, which are myriad, you have to admit that he's a pretty talented commentator and especially debater. So it's interesting to see this happening. It's interesting to see if he'll change course. Do you have any thoughts, Zach?
I mean, mostly I think you covered it pretty well. I think it's just a matter of the fact that this is a long grind, and that after you reach a certain amount of success where you're really comfortable and you feel like you have a dependable audience that just want to watch you do anything, that I could see it being a natural element of, over time, you just become less and less committed to making sure that you have the best possible content. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that, Gavin and I are a duo. If one of us is feeling a little lackluster, the other one can be like, no, dude, we got to fucking keep going and fucking, make it through this time and keep it interesting. And we have fresh ideas to bounce off of and all that kind of shit. But no, for the most part, I think you covered it. And I think he'll bounce back as soon as something big and breaking happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, I thought that would be worth spotlighting. I don't know, just kind of interesting stuff. Always like to keep a pulse on different commentators in their community, how everyone's feeling. But yeah, anyway, I guess we can move on to our last topic. After shouting out Jill S. Thank you so much, Jill, for the $5. Just tuned in. Springfield, Missouri is burning up. How's it in KC? I'm not, at this point, it's funny, Jill, because I don't know if you mean literally or figuratively. Like it's burning up here too. It's hot as hell. But it's very possible that you mean Springfield, Missouri is literally on fire, because it seems like most of the country, if not the world, is at this point. So do you see anything about there being a fire in Springfield, Zach, or do you think that Jill just means it's hot as hell?
No, she just means it's hot as hell. I looked up the 12 states this morning that were on fire, and it's like Oregon, Washington, California, Idaho, Colorado, a couple of others. But anyway, not Missouri. Otherwise, I would have been like, holy shit, it's in the Great Plains. We're all going to fucking die. So shout out to you. Yeah, and it's actually cool today compared to how it's going to be. Today's 91 in Kansas City, but tomorrow it's supposed to be 100, then 101, and then 103. So it's going to be a fucking roasted weekend. But yeah, anyway, thanks so much for the donation today. And yeah, we have one more fun little segment that we've been teasing throughout the live stream before we get out of here.
Yeah, so we do have an announcement to make, guys. As we said at the beginning of the live stream, big announcement coming at the end. So I guess we're at the end of the live stream. Time to make the announcement. And I'll just let this little video clip play. We'll talk a little bit afterward. But yeah, this is just a really quick little announcement clip that we put together last night. Here we go.
So it's finally happening. We are putting the van back in Vanguard, or in Vanguard for the first time since we've embarked on this. Obviously it's been a long time coming. It's something that we've been working on for a long time. But yeah, we've started to gather footage. Obviously, it's not an overnight thing to put out a mini documentary. This is a lot of work. It'll basically double the workload for me and Gavin. But we're committed to doing this. We've always said we were going to do this. It's always been on the horizon. Everything it felt like a bunch of shit just got set in our way. Roadblocks, proverbial roadblocks, getting the van titled, licensed, driving. Even just the other day, I was like turning it on, it wouldn't turn on. I had to go fucking put a new battery. Anyway, fucking problems with that van have been like keeping me awake at night for a long time. And we finally are fucking getting going. And so I know Gavin and I are both really excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So super excited to have the van up and running. We're going to be bringing you guys some documentary content in the near future. Definitely in the next few months, we should have our first couple documentaries to, premiere for you guys. Obviously, they're not going to be like, feature length films, but just little like YouTube size documentaries focused on specific subject matters, spotlighting various movements around the countries, or just anything we really want to talk about or, make a film about. So really excited for that. Hope you guys are excited too. I think it's going to be a really good evolution of our channel where we're actually bringing you guys some real on the ground style reporting and content. Just some more diversity of content for you guys. And, again, a better kind of look at what's actually happening in this country, because Zach and I can sit here from behind our computers in Kansas City and give you our thoughts, but it's a whole nother thing to actually see the reality on the ground across the country. And again, specific subject matters that we feel like don't get enough media attention, or that there's not any coverage of at all, that we want to shine a spotlight on for you guys. Some really important stuff that I think you are going to be interested in finding out more about. So again, stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Obviously, it goes without saying that you're going to want to be subscribed and have that notification bell rung if you want to be notified when we start rolling these documentaries out, start dropping some of this van content. So again, thank you to everyone that's already subscribed. Make sure to join the Vanguard community if you're not already, so that you don't miss out on any of the exciting adventures that Zach and I are getting ready to share with you guys.
Yeah, and yes, it's a real van. It does belong to me and Gavin. We do fear that it will break down, TTID forever. And if we ever break down in Dayton, Ohio, Gavin and I actually have a real unique story about going to Ohio one time that maybe I'll share one day. But yeah, and when we break down, yeah, absolutely. Because as anybody who's ever dealt with a Sprinter van, it is a 2002 Freightliner 2500, big boy. So yeah, and we don't know anything about what we're doing with repairs. So anyway, appreciate everybody that's been bearing with us. We're super excited to make some content on the road. This will keep it fun, keep it fresh. We're still going to do all the same shit that we always do, whether we're recording on the road, Vanguard style content like you know it, or in the studio. We're going to be shaking it up. We're going to be doing a lot of fun shit. The next 90 days are going to be big for this channel. So bear with us and hit that notification bell. We got to get the fuck out of here. But I really appreciate everybody that tuned in. It was a great show today, and we'll hopefully be back tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bruno, or Eric Bruno. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Also, the evil meat. I recognize you as Das Boss Fleisch, but I guess you've changed your name. So thanks, evil meat. I like that one too.
Oh,
really
he says Das Boss Fleisch to me. That's weird that it says evil meat to you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's saying the evil meat to me. Is that what Das Boss Fleisch means?
I have no idea. Probably. Yeah, that sounds like it. I mean, the evil flesh. Yeah, Das Boss Fleisch, the evil meat. Anyway,
weird. Maybe it's translating it for me or something. That's interesting. If you gotta go, that's fine. Okay. But yeah, thanks so much, Das Boss / evil meat. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate that, Alex. Gas money. We really, really appreciate it. Obviously, we're gonna need that. So thank you so much. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in and supporting the show. Appreciate you. Falsificationism, OG subscriber. Can't wait. The van is why I originally said, well, sorry you had to endure the fucking year's worth of content that we subjected you to while you waited. But, you know, you're finally at the point where you're going to get what you signed up for.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope to deliver in spades. You know, Eric Wrighton, if he gets the Republican nominee, will be right in our backyard. We'll be covering his disgusting rallies. We've teased the idea of going undercover at a Greitens rally, all kinds of stuff awaiting in the future. You know, now we're going to really have the resources to do it. It took us a long time to get it together. A lot of people thought it wasn't going to come together, but we were working behind the scenes to get this fucking off the ground. It's way harder than it looks. So shout out to everybody that was bearing with us the whole time. Like you, falsificationism, and we'll get the fuck out of here. And Gavin, if you have any final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Just huge shout out to everyone for tuning in. Thanks so much to the patrons. Speaking of the van stuff and the future of this channel, obviously the patron community is what's making this possible in the first place. So huge shout out, guys. Thanks everyone that tunes in. But again, specifically the patrons who we do like to shout out at the beginning and end of every single live stream, because you guys make the show possible. There would be no Vanguard if it were not for your support. So huge shout out. Thank you so much. And hit up that link in the description if you're trying to become a part of the Vanguard community. Again, it's a great way to be on the ground level when things start dropping. We give our patrons access to the Discord community. We give our patrons the shout out and priority on our monthly Q&A. So we got some good benefits for you guys, but please do consider signing up if you enjoy our show and the content we create. It really, really helps. And also, you know, if you're not able to, obviously that's totally understandable. Just please hit that like button. As both parties are traders is saying, only 12 more to reach 200. So please hit that like button. But yeah, really appreciate everyone tuning in. Genuinely do. Thank you all for sitting around today and enjoying the show. Hope you guys got something out of it. And we're going to get the hell out of here, but we'll see you probably tomorrow. And Zach's out of here, so it's just me. But, you know, peace out, guys.